Te mea tutahi Mark, e tautoko ana tō tātou wakaritengi te ata nei. Ko te aho te atua ki tēnā o tātou. Kei te mohi o tātou katoa, ko te ata te timana tanga, ko te ata wakamutunga ki wakapainga tonengwa. E tuarua, ngāti whakau e, te aroa waka, mihi mai wakatau mai. E henore nui tēnei ki a mātou ngā hau e whā kua tai mai i rungu te o reo karanga. E rau te atawhai o tō manakitanga, no reira, mihi mai wakatau mai. Huri no kia tātou e tauna i tēnei wā, e ngā waka, e ngā reo, e ngā kararanga maa, tēnā koutou, tēnā o ki tātou katoa. Thank you for welcoming me and being part of this. I warned you from the beginning, I'm a bit of a clown when it comes to PowerPoint, so if I lose touch with it, don't worry. And my PowerPoint, everything's done in a rush these days, and let's hope I can bewitch you with my words and not confuse you with what I'm trying to say. And I've very carefully written everything down because otherwise I'll rave on for the rest of the day. And it might seem, so if I'm reading, it's because I'm trying to control myself. It might seem quite strange to begin a paper at a conference such as this by talking about Tutu, or Tupaakihi as it's known in the north. The only thing that most people know about Tutu, or toot, is that it's deadly poisonous. It can kill people. And the number of stories about stock and other animals dying from eating tutu are legendary. Who hasn't heard the story about the elephant that died many years ago from eating tutu? And how many towns have claimed the dubious honour of being the site of that fatal misfortune? Even though I can show you where the elephant is buried. It's in Ohakune. In recent years, beekeepers have got into the act, wary of the dangers of honey made toxic by the presence of tutu and honeydew collected by bees in late summer and autumn. Some even want to have it declared a noxious weed and have it exterminated from the landscape. But how many people realise and are prepared to accept that tutu is a very important rongoā? The first rongoā that Auntie Rua, the kuia from Wanganui that taught me rongoā nearly 50 years ago, asked me to collect was tutu because one of her mokopun had been injured playing rugby. Tutu was very much used as a rongoā for treating sprains and breaks and injuries that came with sports and other vigorous activities. Many great Māori sports people can attest to its power. Jim Maniapoto, that legendary lock forward from years back, used to tell how his father would have a bath of tutu prepared when his boys came home from their many battles on the rugby field. And traditional uses were much wider than that. But it's very hard to convince people that it's safe, and not just safe, but very effective. Seeing is believing, but too many people won't believe even what they see. Now, I think I meant to do something here. Oh, good pop. What do I do next? Oh, well, yeah, ka pai tēnā. Hey, can I just wave at you? You can wave. Ka pai tēnā. But, isn't that exactly where Rongoā Māori continues to be? Seeing is believing, but it's very hard to see when you don't want to believe or it doesn't suit you to believe. From the very early times of European settlement in Aotearoa, there was a great reluctance among the new settlers to recognise what Māori had to offer. They were determined to transplant their Northern Hemisphere lifestyle as far as possible into this new land, even when it didn't make sense. It's a very good example is how we as a nation plan our year. Even today, this country still runs on a Northern Hemisphere calendar, even though we live in the Southern Hemisphere. We are out of touch with the seas and the natural rhythms of the world we live in, and we wonder why there is such a crisis about mental health. Really, Christmas is a midwinter festival, And the Northern Hemisphere is held when people are depressed because of the cold that comes with the dark days of winter. The festivities of Christmas are meant to give them a lift and remind them that the cold and darkness of that time of year is the birth of the new year and all the hope that it brings. It has a similar role to Mātarihi. And midwinter celebrations are universal in almost every culture for that reason. They give hope to people at the time of year when they are really feeling down. Easter is a spring festival, celebrating the birth of life as the earth begins to warm. Yet even today, we have Santa Claus arriving on his sleigh and Christmas carols about dancing through the snow. Just imagine what our kiwi fruit growers would feel if it snowed at Christmas. And what a pain Easter is, especially in places like Hawke's Bay and the Bay of Plenty, when the rural workforce is focused on picking and packing the year's harvest. That's the worst time to take a few days off to celebrate and to pretend it's spring. We need to realign our calendars to work in sync with the seasons. It's not really such a big change. People who work with the land have always done that here in Aotearoa, farmers, orchardists, horticulturists, foresters, and they have always been the backbone of our economy. Just imagine how much easier it would be in the lives of school children, their teachers and especially their parents, if we started the teaching year just after Mātarihi, when spring was about to burst into life, rather than trying to jumpstart the kids in the middle of summer when they would rather be enjoying the beach and other summer activities. While all around the season is beginning to start its autumn wind down and slow down, fruit ripening, firewood storing and the like. We are worried with how to deal with the growing mental health issues given the stress of modern living. Rearranging our lives to work with the seasons would provide a real bonus. It wouldn't require lots more money, as major changes seem to always to do. In fact, the benefits to the economy could be very significant. Surfing with the seasons would save a lot of stress and make my life much more enjoyable. But we insist on swimming against the tide, keeping in time with the homeland of the ancestors of those who today still set the rules. A major key to finding a solution to our health challenges is not more money for the health services or more doctors and nurses, but learning to live in time with the seasons and the harmonies of the place that is our home. That's where Rongoā Māori can show us the way. The Rongoā is not about using plants for medicines and chanting ancient karakias that most people don't understand and many are too ready to deride. It's more about restoring the balance that is needed to be well. That has many dimensions. If, as a country, we were to work to re-establish our way of living, to keep in touch with the passing of the seasons as Māori used to do, before they were compelled to live with the dictates of those who migrated from the Northern Hemisphere, we would do much to advance the health and well-being of our communities. The celebration of Mātarihi is a good start in that direction, and we need to build on that. It did not take too long to adjust to daylight saving when we adjusted our clocks to make the most of the daylight hours. Maybe we have reached the stage where we can adjust our annual calendar to maximise the benefits of working with the energy of the seasons. We need to do this for the sake of our health, especially our mental health, and of course for our economy. The battle to have Māori accepted to provide valid and effective treatment continues. ACC is to be congratulated and greatly thanked for creating pathways to enable people it serves to have access to the benefits of the Rongoā Māori. And that's just the beginning. There's much more involved than making available the benefits of the Rongoā to ACC clients. We have already mentioned how effective Tutu can be in treating some of the injuries that is very often the cause of claims to ACC. There are many other Rongoā that are equally effective, but that is only one part of what Rongoā has to offer and not the most significant. Even greater benefit comes from the fact that at last Rongoā Māori has been given recognition by one major government ministry at least. The fact that the government and the mainstream health providers have been unwilling to accept the contribution Māori is able to make to healthcare is more than just a deep hurt. The greatest reason for poor Māori health is not poor diet, poor housing, low educational achievement and the many other factors that are constantly in the spotlight. Rather, as has been well documented, from the imposition of Pākehā rule in 1852 and the establishment of the first parliament, Māori were increasingly marginalised and treated as inferior. They had little or no say in the decisions that decided the direction of the development of the country. From the very beginning, the intention of the settler government was to destroy the very basis of Māori society to secure their own possession of what this land had to offer. As happened in many parts of the world in the 19th century, European cultures saw themselves as superior to any of the many cultures they encountered and presumed their right to lay claim to the resources of the countries they took control of and to impose their culture on its peoples. That cut at the very base of Māori society. Māori lost their right to self-determination and at best were tolerated by Pākehā in New Zealand, but only in as much as they kept out of sight and didn't try to interfere in the proper development of the country. Any efforts to try and uphold the promises made in the treaty were dismissed and often treated with contempt. Māori were expected to fade away or at least be assimilated into the mainstream Pākehā culture. Their mana, their sense of identity was taken away. Mana is not about power and authority, it's about that sense of self-worth which is the foundation of one's dignity as a person. Take away a person's dignity, their sense of self-worth, and you deprive him or her of the very foundation of personal health. There's no need to detail the effects of 180 years of colonization. That's well documented. But the outcomes as far as health is concerned are the many Māori, maybe most Māori, who have lost touch with themselves and their culture. They lost their identity, became strangers in the land that used to be theirs. How can you be a tangata whenua when you've lost touch with the whenua, your whenua, when you don't even know where your whenua might be because you were born and brought up in a city far from where your old people came, born of parents who were also city-born. Māori have become migrants in their own country, forced to leave the places where they had their tūranga waiwai, because what little remained was unable to support those who belonged there. How do people who find themselves in a world with little opportunity retain hope? The ill health that afflicts so many finds its origin in the hopelessness that dominated their lives. The illnesses that we are confronted with in 2024, the diabetes, obesity, malnutrition, addictions, etc., are the fruits of that emptiness. Rongoā rakau may alleviate some of those conditions, but it won't heal the emptiness. To me, the greatest contribution that successive governments have made towards tackling the issues around Māori health has come through the work of the Waitangi Tribunal. Ever since its establishment in 1974, the Tribunal has investigated the many claims that have been brought before it, and through its many reports have sought to redress the imbalance that have left Māori too often at the bottom of the heap without the resources to have the access to what they need for their health and well-being. In many ways, the Tribunal has helped restore the connections that enabled Māori to recover their mana. Mana is the foundation of health. Did that change? It is something derived from the atua and from the ancestors. Without mana, one becomes a nobody, unable even to have control of one's life and direction. Losing mana is like being stripped naked and left to contend with the elements without any protection at all. The process of colonization increasingly deprived Māori of the connections and resources they needed to sustain their mana, and many lived without hope. There was a time for many not too far in the past when Māori parents and grandparents fluent in te reo would not speak te reo in front of their children and refused even to allow them to learn because they could not see it as a help in the world that they were coming into. They saw being Māori as a disadvantage, an obstacle to finding their way in the world that they lived in. But those days belong to the past. Being Māori, for many, is seen as their greatest asset and is promoted and celebrated. There's still a long way to go, and the depth of the hurt, the scar tissue, which stymies the growth and development of so many people, is a burden which will be carried many generations into the future. But a corner has been turned, and many things that seemed like an impossible dream to the kaumata who began my journey in the world of Rongoā have become a reality far beyond their wildest hopes and expectations. People are beginning to recover their histories, the names of the places which told them their stories, and have some access to the resources to begin to re-establish their foundations and to create real opportunities for the coming generations. In very many ways, the greatest boost to Aotearoa's economy in the last 50 years is not the establishment of super companies like Zespri and Frontiera, who are able to compete effectively in the open international marketplace, but the rebirth of the Māori economy. Māori are more and more beginning to do what they did so well in the early years of European settlement, take the lead in using their skills and resources and creating a better future for the whole of Aotearoa and all of its people. But let's get back to Tutu. A little has already been said about their medicinal properties, and many great sports people can attest to that. Much more could be said. It would be easy to spend the next half hour speaking about various rongoā and the benefits they bring, and a lot of you already know that. And of course, such IP is commercially sensitive. Māori are continuously battling to retain control of their own mātauranga. But is that what Rongoā Māori really is? Is that all it has to offer, a whole new addition to the world's heritage of herbal medicine? That is a different sort of healing to that which has begun to happen as a result of the work of the tribunal and the efforts of the Crown to respond to the recommendations that the tribunal has made. That healing happens deep inside and is a beginning to restore mana Māori. That is a foundation that opens a way to dealing with the current health issues that affect so many people. I was told from the very beginning that in my Rongoā journey that the foundation of Rongoā was not rakau but plants. It took me a long time to get my head around that, even though as a Catholic priest at the time and somebody who should have recognised it immediately exactly what it meant. But I was only interested in learning about the plants. If we really want to see Rongoā Māori find its place in the health system in Aotearoa, it must be as Māori know it to be, not as others perceive it to be. That means beginning to see the world through Māori eyes, eyes that have learnt to see by being part of this landscape for nearly 1,000 years. It takes time to become tangata whenua, people who are so connected to the whenua that they can hear it talking. Māori didn't survive in Aotearoa by importing and implementing the lifestyle they had back in Hawaii with a minimum of change. They brought with them the mātauranga of their tupuna, but they realised they had come to a very different world and used that mātauranga to find a way of adapting to this new land that had become their home. Even the reo changed. It began to reflect the sounds of Aotearoa. The foundation of Mātauranga Māori was very different to that of pioneer settlers from Europe. The settlers came from a world that saw mankind as the masters of the universe, and all that it contained were resources for their use. It was an individualistic world, one that put individual entitlement ahead of the common good. That wasn't how everybody thought and acted, but it was the dominant view of those who took the lead as Aotearoa developed as a nation within the British Empire. And part of that thinking meant that they believed they were superior to other peoples and cultures and had the right to impose their ways and their language on whoever they encountered, even if the country they had come to was very different to their homeland. From the early years of self-government, New Zealanders were obliged to carry on as if they were still living in the Northern Hemisphere, as I already said, even if it meant being out of step with the seasons and rhythms of the land that had become their home. Of course, that didn't matter. They had control, and even if they couldn't control the seasons, they could control the people who lived on the land. Māori never made such an enormous and actually incomprehensible mistake when they first arrived in Aotearoa. Admittedly, they came from the Southern Hemisphere, but it was a very different place from where they'd come from, much colder to start with and unsuitable for the crops and fruits that were crucial for their diet and lifestyle. They coped and adjusted because they learned from the world around them and were guided by the wisdom they had brought with them. They were not masters of the universe, owners of all they could see, but born from the whenua and part of the whenua. They saw themselves as part of an interconnected world whose wellness depends on the strength of those connections. The key to life and survival was maintaining the balance needed for life to thrive. And that was reflected in how they understood health and healing. Take Tutu, for instance. It's not a resource there to benefit people for its medicinal properties or to be eliminated from the landscape if you're a beekeeper. Rather, the purpose of Tutu is to heal the whenua after something bad has happened, a fire, a flood, a volcanic eruption. Māori learned from that and learned how to make use of its special properties in treating injuries and sickness. The key to their use of plants as medicine was what they learned from the plants themselves and how they helped heal the whenua and sustain the balance that it needed to be well. As the old people kept telling me in Waitangi and many places since, get to know the plants and they will tell you everything you need to know. It is that wisdom that is the basis of Māori understanding of health and healing. It is derived from living with the whenua, watching, listening, learning, and all the time doing what was needed to ensure that they could survive and thrive. That way of learning was based on a different set of priorities to direct their lives to those who are the basis of how the Western world operates. Now, these priorities were based on the Te Waiwaka principles. First and foremost, caring for the whenua, the earth. Papatuanuku is the number one priority. The planet is not a resource to be exploited for human benefit. It is our home. The whenua, Papatuanuku, is the source of all life. She is a mother, ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. Caring for the whenua is the first priority. Everything must be measured against this. Now, that's not original. It's the base of almost every traditional culture. In English, we talk about Mother Earth. We need to keep in mind when we are talking about, keep this in mind when we're talking about health and healing. No amount of funding is going to get the country on top of dealing with our health challenges. The costs keep going up as more effective and costly medicines are developed and technologies continue to evolve as the human race continues its quest to avoid death. It would help our medical researchers read and reread the story of Maui and what happened when he thought he had found the way to overcome death. If only he had heard and heeded the warning of the Tiwai Waka. That's the reason why we've actually talked about our Tiwai Waka principles, and somewhere I got a little book about that, but anyway, I'll keep it. We live in a world that's increasingly damaged and polluted, especially because of human activity. And more we are faced with the reality of increasing shortages of the most basic needs, food and water. In Aotearoa, we have big issues with water, especially access to water that's safe to use. How many illnesses are caused by poor water quality? And how many communities struggle with water supply? And how much does that cost the country on an annual basis? Not just the cost of treating the water, but all the ill health that happens because of poor water. Yes, there are all sorts of extra water treatment plants being set up and all sorts of rules and regulations that keep developing to ensure all New Zealanders have access to water that is safe to use. But is water that needs chemical treatment to make it potable, healthy water? What does that do to its mauri? The chemicals used, even in the most minute amounts, in time are detrimental to health. But that's acceptable because the alternative is much worse. We may still remember what happened in Havelock North because of contaminated water supply. We need to get back to root causes instead of trying to solve the problems by using more effective ways of treating the water or building more dams to ensure a reliable supply for our ever-growing needs. It is the whenua that gives us water we need and determines both its quantity and quality. If the whenua is not well, nor will the water, and ultimately nor will we. There's no point in blaming the people on the land, the farmers and forests and others who make their living from the land. Most of our water begins its journey on land managed by DOC, and yet the funding DOC has to care for 30% of the country is increasingly reduced because it is needed for more important matters, funding our health system being one of them. And the Ministry for the Environment is suffering from similar problems. Biodiversity is not just about ensuring that kiwi and kakapo and Maori dolphin and other iconic species survive. It's about sustaining the network of life so that it remains intact, to care for the whenua so they can continue to thrive. Life needs life to be well. The more our biodiversity diminishes, the more desperate our struggle to survive becomes. The gains for the economy from cutting funding to agencies that care for the whenua and investing it in developing our businesses that will create cash flow will cost much more in the long time. I'm saying this for the Minister of Finance. Increased dairy production through its irrigation won't cover the cost of extra medical care caused by increased nitrogen contamination of groundwaters. If we were to invest in the environment, in particular caring for the whenua, we would get a much better return for the people of the land than squeezing the environment to make more money from what it can produce to improve our balance of payment. It would certainly benefit the health of the nation. Ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. If we are serious about improving our health, we need to begin by caring for the whenua. If the land is well, we are well. Being better able to afford to go to the doctor doesn't equate to better health care. Caring for the whenua is the first priority. It is always the number one priority. Not even the economy, getting the economy back into balance takes precedence to that. Let's dig further into the priorities that traditional people live by. We need to get over the illusion that we are masters of the universe and can take whatever we need and as much as we need, as of right. We are not the centre of the universe, but we are part of it. All living creatures are our brothers and sisters, and we are the last born, the pōtiki. Papa Tuanuku is our mother. We must care for them. Historically, Māori were very careful in how they lived with the environment. They had learned to be careful, to maintain the balances needed to ensure they would survive. Over-harvesting meant hunger or even starvation a little further down the track. The karakia and tikanga around every aspect of life weren't meaningless ceremonies for their own sake. or pagan eccentricities of uncivilized people, as often they are described. They were about maintaining health and wellness. They were strictly adhered to enable people to survive. People had to live within the boundaries that the whenua imposes. Tapu is about upholding those boundaries. That way of operating has not been part of recent industrial societies. The emphasis has been on increasing production to increase wealth, and with that power. The presumption was that the planet would always be able to provide. More and more people are beginning to realise that isn't true, that the planet's resources are limited and need to be used carefully. Some people fantasise that in the future the shortfall can be made up by mining resources from outer space. Note their renewed interest in exploring the moon. But really that's just an excuse, a distraction, an excuse to keep doing what industrial society have always done, discovering and developing new resources to contribute to the momentum of ever-growing wealth, and not wanting to admit that they're being fools. Really, the modern economy, as it is managed today, is a pyramid scheme on a planetary scale, and like all pyramid schemes, will inevitably collapse. And what happens to the people who are alive when it does? How will they survive? That might be our grandchildren. To ensure our future, we need to relearn our place in the network of life. We are not masters of the universe, but we are part of the family of life. All living beings need to be treated with respect, even the most insignificant. They all contribute to the gift of life that we all share. Our wellness depends on their wellness, not on our ability to tame nature, as some 19th century philosophers thought they could do. That brings us to mauri. The mauri is a web of connections that sustain life. If any of these connections is weakened or broken, the mauri is less able to sustain life. The integrity of the mauri and its web of connections has greater priority than the rights and needs of any individual or species. Now, there's lots of talks about mauri these days. It's included in so many important documents, but how many really know what it is? Sometimes it seems like one of those exotic creations that come out of the depth of Te Ao Māori, so shrouded in mystery that only a truly enlightened mind could understand what it actually means. It helps to quote Māori Marston, "Immanent within all creation is mauri, the life force which generates, regenerates and upholds creation. It is a bonding element that knits all the diverse elements within the universal procession, giving creation its unity and diversity. It is a bonding element that holds the fabric of the universe together. Mauri is found in the connections that enables life to thrive." We can use that to examine what is meant by health. The Oxford English Dictionary defines it as the state of being free from illness or injury, or a person's mental or physical condition. But that doesn't really enlighten us as to how well a person really is. You can't say a person is healthy just because all the things that are usually measured are within the normal range: blood pressure, heart rate, sugar levels, etc. Look at health from a Māori perspective. We could say a person is healthy or well when all the connections that sustain him or her are in place and are strong. How many apparently strong and healthy people have taken their own lives because they couldn't cope with the emptiness, the lack of hope they felt deep inside? That's where the work of the Waitangi Tribunal becomes very relevant. It has made a major contribution in restoring the connections that had restored mana to Māori. Life is like trying to cross a river. If you are struggling to keep your footing, all your energy goes into stopping yourself from being swept away. Once your footing is secure, you can look around and choose your way forward. The process that Aotearoa has been on over the last 200 years has eroded the foundations of Māori society and left people struggling to keep their footing. So many of the certainties that gave them their identity, their mana, have been eroded and lost. The tribunal has helped create a way to restore those foundations enabling more people to find their feet in this different world. Like the founders from Hawaii 1,000 years ago, the key to the future is not about abandoning the wisdom and mātauranga from the past, from tūpuna, but using that as a foundation to build a new future. As the Whakatauki keeps reminding us, e kore ngaro, te kākano, e ruia mai rangiatia. The tribunal and the Crown actions that have implemented some of its recommendations have started to give back some of those kākano, the seeds for the future. Our place as the Pōtiki, Tāne's youngest children, is to care for the Māori. Te tangata people are not the masters of the Māori, we're part of the Māori and embraced by it. Our role is to care for Māori. In doing so, we are cared for by it. We find peace. We are at home. Home is a powerful word. It reaches deep inside all of us. For some, it brings back beautiful memories of warmth and security. For others, it's like the promised land, a place that they have never really known, but one day hope to find. We find our home not by accumulating enough money to afford to buy one, but by making the connections that give us a real sense of belonging and the warmth and security that brings. We find that in giving, not in collecting and accumulating. The people of today, so staunch in upholding their personal and individual rights, need to remember that the key to a secure future is found in working to restore the connections the world we live in needs to be well. Never before has the human race been in such a powerful position to do so. The knowledge and technology that has developed over thousands of years of human development, particularly highlighted by the technology that exists in our lifestyle today, in so many ways, gives us the capacity to endorse life in a way that has never been possible before. But we have to keep reminding ourselves the gifts we have, including the resources that modern technology has developed, are for the benefit of the whole network of life, not to create personal wealth and entrench the power and domination of those that wealth can bring, of others that wealth can bring. We have to recognise that the quest for wealth, ever-increasing wealth, is not a hallmark of success, but in fact an addiction, an uncontrollable need to keep accumulating more and more. An addiction to wealth is like any other addiction, be it drugs, alcohol, food, work. It can lead to self-destruction and pain and desperation to those with whom one is closely associated. The only certainty in that lonely journey of addiction is that a day will inevitably come when all that wealth must be left behind and the realisation that the gift of life has been wasted. A truly rich person is the one who has learned to give, not just to other people, but to the whenua itself and all the life that it embraces. If we can learn how to heal the connections that enable the whole planet to survive, the Māori, we may indeed find the promised land, the utopia that the human spirit has always longed for. That really outlines the next of the Te Waiwaka principles. No individual person is more important than any other. Each must contribute what they have to offer, and receive what they need to be well. We are most well when we are sustained by the Māori, the web of connections that makes us who we are. We need to keep that in mind when we view the growing gap between rich and poor in Aotearoa. How can we say that there is a housing shortage in Tauranga, for instance, when there are so many luxury homes in the area that are unoccupied for most of the year? That is a situation that we can no longer afford to tolerate. It may cost us our future. The inequities in our societies are luxuries we can no longer afford. How can we be sincere in our concerns about the inequities when we are not prepared to share when we have more than we need to live a happy and healthy life? People who have worked hard and carried heavy responsibilities are entitled to enjoy the benefits of their labour, but that sense of entitlement of some reaches far beyond that. That's not calling for a revolution, as has happened in the past in different parts of the world, but it really is calling for a massive change of heart. And that is something that would indeed be revolutionary. The key to finding solutions of the current issues is sharing, not developing better and more effective technologies. There's one final principle. We must give special care for the tiniest living creatures. Even though they are too small to be seen, they are the foundation that keeps and sustains all life. Caring for them is caring for the mauri. That is a source of wellness, of sustainability. Thanks to modern research, we are becoming more and more aware of the key role the microbes play in every aspect of life. That applies particularly to health and healing. One of the drawbacks of the many modern drug treatments is that they are non-discriminatory. They don't just hit the target they were designed to treat, but they can affect many other cells, particularly the microbes that are necessary to keep us well. We can only access many of the nutrients in our food with the help of the little micro-helpers that live in our digestive system. Without them, we miss out, and we can suffer all sorts of deficiencies. Cancer treatments provide many examples, and so are the many antibiotics used to combat illness. The disease may be effectively addressed, but often the patient is put at risk because their immune system has been seriously affected. Most of the microbes that play a special role in maintaining the body's health and are sourced from the food we eat, particularly from fresh fruit and vegetables. A particular disadvantage today is that much of the food we eat has been sprayed, and that affects not just the pests or diseases that might be the issue, but also the microbes that live within us. It is even more the case with food that is grown in completely sterile environments. Such food may contain the nutrients we are looking for, but they may not have the microbes we need to continuously colonize the microbes we need to access these nutrients. With that in mind, it is good to have another look at rakau. Rongoā made from plants and trees. Most rongoā comes from wild harvested plants. They are mostly prepared from leaves and branches collected from the ngahere, the bush. Rongoā are prepared for different purposes, but an added bonus is that they are likely to be spray-free and therefore carry the microbes we need to be well. But not always. Uncle Paul Marekura once told me that one of the very most important rongoā is puha. It's a superfood. But what about puha that comes from orchards and paddocks where lots of spray is used? We are likely to get a dose of spray residues that in time can build up in our bodies and cause ill health. Roundup, for instance, is implicated in more and more studies concerning health. Is the use of puha and watercress from places where lots of agricultural chemicals are used the cause of so many of the cancers that affect so many people? There are so many things to worry about. Much of what we do in our modern way of living directly affects the microbes that are the key to sustaining the mauri that upholds the network of life. It's not just the use of sprays and chemicals and other agricultural practices that are having such an effect. Our obsession with cleanliness that leads to all sorts of chemicals and other methods to kill off any microbe that dare come close to us. The masses of highways and urban developments that cover more and more of the earth. By suppressing the microbes, we're reducing the whenua's ability to heal itself. Their role, especially fungi, is to break down waste and recycle it. That enables life to keep thriving. And it's not just the microbes that are having a hard time. Insect numbers are all around the world are plummeting. That's not all bad news. Less flies to buck us in the summertime, less sandflies. But many trees and plants rely on insects for pollinating. And if they were to disappear, we might end up like cows and sheep, relying mostly on grass to keep us going. I could go on and make us even more depressed. And depression is a major health issue. Lots of people, more and more people, have a deep down feeling that no matter how hard they try, it's not going to make a difference. They struggle to find hope in the future and content themselves with making the most of their opportunities, living for the moment and not very interested in helping to address the issues that confront us, because in the end it's futile. So why waste the time trying? That leads to people leaving their mess for others to clean up, and a winner-takes-all way of living with fewer and fewer people, the winners, accumulating more wealth and power and more people living without hope. The Waitangi Tribunal has documented in its many reports how loss of mana has contributed to the current situation that we're trying hard to address. But that loss of identity, that loss of dignity, which more and more people experience, means their only ambition is to try and find a way to survive. That feeling of hopelessness is a contagion that is spreading its network of depression over the whole planet, or so it seems. Old people are hoping that they might pass away before it gets too bad. Young people deciding never to have children because it would be unfair to bring children into the world we have created. It is certain that we won't find the answers to the problems that confront us as a nation, as a species, and the thinking that created them. Not even the development of technology or better economic management or mining the moon. That is a foolish hope. Rather, we need a new start based on different wisdom, a different way of thinking, one that has come down from those who have gone before us. We already have our pathway into the future, mapped out for us in the wisdom of those who have gone before us, not just Māori, all of us. We all have tupuna, ancestors. The Tiwai Waka principles come from that, and the same thinking is found in many cultures throughout the world, using their own stories and words. We can move forward by looking backwards and drawing on the wisdom and experience of those who have gone before us. And where does the Rongoā Māori fit into this? Lots of people make use of kawakawa these days. It's a wonderful rongoā and helpful in many ways, but rakau won't solve Aotearoa's health crisis. We need to think more broadly than that. Maybe the key is to work to align the way we live in Aotearoa with the rhythms of the land, the cycle of the seasons, as Māori did before people arrived from the north and imposed their seasons. We need to do that, not because it's Māori and it comes from the treaty, but because this is the southern hemisphere. And that's how the year runs down here. We don't live in the north, we live in the south. We need to de-northernise. If we live in a way that draws on the rhythms of the seasons, we connect to a wave of eddies that will carry us forward and help us to regain the balance we need to be well. We have to stop spending our energy trying to swim against the tide. We need to live with nature, not despite it. We are the children of the earth, not outsiders trying to take control. We are the youngest members of the network of life, living with the whānau we belong to in a way that works to ensure that we are all, the whole network of life, well. It's not an impossible dream. We've made a start with Mātariki, so let's carry on with the journey. The Tiwai Waka principles can provide us with a pathway that enables us to realign the priorities that enable Māori to make their home in this new land. No matter what we do, we must always make sure that the caring for the whenua, papatuanuku, is always, that's all the principles, okay? No matter what we make sure that papatuanuku is always the first priority, without exception. That we are not the bosses, but very much part of the family of life. That we focus especially on caring for the mauri, the network of connections that enables life to thrive. And maybe, most of all, start by focusing on the little things, not just the microbes, but on each other. Together we can create a new world. The solutions we need come not from me or from you, but from us, all of us. What we need is the faith to believe that it is so, not to close our minds to the possibilities of what we can achieve when we truly learn to work together. The most powerful rongoā of all is a little 4-letter word: hope. If we have hope, the impossible becomes just another challenge, one that we can overcome because we work together. Kia ora tātou.
Tata,